Tonight, tracking the movements of the New Orleans attacker, including a trip to Canada.
Our agents are getting answers as to where he went, who he met with.
What Canadian officials have to say about the international investigation.
Given the shortness of his stay in Canada, it's really hard at this point to determine what we can provide the Americans with.
And the high-tech glasses the suspect used to record the area months before. A doctor's prescription to help healthcare with ERs over capacity.
The problem isn't the emergency room. The emergency room ends up being the proverbial canary in the coal mine.
My headphones were blasting like 100, and I still heard it.
Also, a horrific crash captured on camera. Plus, chronic flight delays.
It's not surprising to hear that they're at the bottom.
Ranking world airlines for on-time performance.
So there's something systemically wrong with the way in which they plan and dispatch aircraft.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. We're learning more about the suspect in the deadly New Orleans truck ramming, the New Year's Day attack that left 14 people dead. Police now tracing his international travel, with Canadian officials confirming tonight the man behind the rampage visited Ontario. The FBI now looking into whether the visit is connected to his actions. CTV's Kamal Karamali has more. Kamal, what did the FBI say about the travel timeline?
Heather, the FBI now saying Shamsuddin Jabbar traveled to Ontario back in 2023, a year and a half before the attack, where he spent 4 days in the province in mid-July. Before that, in late June of that same year, he also made a separate trip to Cairo, Egypt.
Our agents are getting answers as to where he went, who he met with, and how those trips may or may not tie into his actions here in our city in New Orleans.
Canada's public safety minister is now asking any Canadians who may have come into contact with the attacker and who may have information pertinent to the FBI's investigation to reach out to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. While the RCMP confirmed to CTV News it's engaging with U.S. authorities on this investigation. As part of that investigation, the FBI today releasing this. Take a look. Video recorded by Jabbar through smart glasses, visiting the New Orleans neighborhood in October and November, weeks before he would drive a truck down the same area, plowing down pedestrians and killing 14 people on New Year's Day. He was eventually killed in a firefight with police. New video also shows Jabbar dropping off improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, hidden inside coolers. Both explosives had failed to go off. Jabbar, a U.S. citizen from Texas who served in Afghanistan, had pledged allegiance to the Islamic extremist group ISIS. He's believed to have acted alone, but FBI said it's looking at potential associates outside of the U.S. and why he may have come to Canada.
He was having personal issues, relationship issues, financial issues. Was the travel associated with that in any way?
Another big question security analysts say investigators will be sure to look into: did Jabbar's trip to Ontario coincide with when he started to become radicalized? Heather.
CTV's Kamal Karamali reporting for us tonight. There are new developments in the case of two men convicted in the deaths of an Indian family who froze to death trying to cross the Manitoba border into the U.S. The pair, who were convicted of human smuggling last November, are now seeking an acquittal or new trials. Their lawyers argue there was insufficient evidence tying them to a smuggling operation. The frozen bodies of the Patel family were found in a Manitoba field in January of 2022, steps away from the U.S. border. Power is slowly being restored to thousands of people in Newfoundland and Labrador as a winter storm ravages the province. Massive waves slammed the coastline today, leading to localized flooding. Some businesses suffered damage and roadways were closed. Many areas saw wind gusts upwards of 120 kilometers an hour. Environment Canada has issued weather warnings for the majority of Newfoundland and parts of Labrador. In the U.S., more than 60 million people are under winter weather alerts as a massive storm brings intense cold, snow, and ice. Several regions have declared states of emergency. Thousands have been left without power and hundreds of flights canceled as the storm blows east. CTV News has learned some staffers in the Prime Minister's office have been told to come into the office in person on Monday. No clarification yet on exactly why, but it comes as speculation is mounting about whether the Prime Minister is set to announce what he'll do next. CTV's Rahim Ladani has more.
As calls for the Prime Minister to step down grow louder, the man Trudeau recruited to be a special advisor has emerged as a front-runner in a potential Liberal Party leadership race.
Former Governor of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, it will be the prohibitive frontrunner in this race. One, because he's extraordinarily talented. Two, because he's got the skill set in the area where Trudeau was the weakest, which is the economy.
Sources tell CTV News Mark Carney is actively considering running to be Trudeau's replacement. His economic track record could play favorably with Canadians, many of whom feel life has become unaffordable, and with the looming threat of tariff negotiations with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump.
The average Canadian is saying, look, the Liberal brand is still there. Trudeau is not. He's not on their radar screen at all. That's what's been fueling the 20-something% lead for the Conservatives. So if Carney makes it into the race, it'll be a game changer.
The latest poll from Nanos Research shows the federal Conservatives with a commanding 47% support over the Liberal 21%. It's a daunting deficit that has others believing even if Carney were to step in as leader, it wouldn't be enough to change the outcome of the upcoming election.
With all respect to whoever might take this thing over, I don't think that there's a person who's going to completely transform the circumstances where they're all of a sudden going to come first, right? This is going to be a 6-year project, an 8-year project, at least a 4-year project. And is that what Carney or any of these people want to sign up for at this point?
A special National Caucus meeting where the Prime Minister will face his Liberal MPs is set for Wednesday and a lengthy 6 hours. It will be the first time they meet since Trudeau said he'd be reflecting over the holidays.
What Liberals want is stability. And so I think if the Prime Minister's decision is to step aside, then we want to see a plan to, whether or not there's a leadership race, what that leadership race looks like. Is there an interim leader? Does the Prime Minister stay on during a leadership?
Many unanswered questions amidst Trudeau's uncertain political future. Rahim Ladani, CTV News, Toronto.
It seems an ill wind is blowing through hospitals across the country. Today, ERs in Montreal were at nearly double capacity limits, while wait times across the country stretch on for hours. CTV's Colton Prail on what doctors say is a healthcare system teetering on the edge.
It's the last stop for patients needing care. And over the holidays, for many, the emergency room was the only option.
As soon as Boxing Day comes, the numbers start trickling up, and it's predictable. It happens every single year.
In Montreal, the emergency room at the Jewish General Hospital was at 223% capacity today. And at the Montreal General Hospital, nearly 200%. It's an issue doctors say is rippling out across the country and having a big impact on patient care.
It eats at your soul to walk down a hallway and trying to avoid the eyes of the people that are lying there in pain that you know you can't get to as you're on your way to take care of someone else. And that is the hardest part.
More and more patients are spending hours waiting for medical help. Today in Alberta, it was under 4 hours, but for most of the country, waits exceeded 5 hours. And at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, it was nearly 14 hours.
It is a gamble to leave someone in a waiting room, hoping that they're going to be okay until we can get to them.
Part of the problem is a lack of access to primary care. Nearly 1 in 5 Canadians don't have a family doctor or nurse practitioner, and holiday closures make accessing that care even harder. It's driving up ER visits, which the Canadian Institute for Health Information says climbed by 400,000 last year compared to the year before.
We're the sign that something is wrong with the healthcare system. And the problem with the healthcare system is there aren't enough resources being put into our communities.
Doctors say governments need to do a better job informing people of other care options that can help, like telehealth platforms and pharmacists. But they also argue patients need to speak out about a healthcare system that's not serving them the way it should. Heather.
Colton, thank you. To some dramatic video now of a terrifying crash in Ottawa. You can see the car driving the wrong way before crashing into a hydro pole. The collision snapped power lines, leaving hundreds of people in nearby buildings in the dark. The 50-year-old driver of the vehicle was taken to hospital with critical injuries. Meanwhile, a man is in custody in BC tonight after a vehicle blew through the Canada-U.S. border crossing in Surrey. Authorities say this truck with Washington state plates drove into Canada this morning without stopping at the border checkpoint. Agents contacted Surrey police, who say they spotted the vehicle driving dangerously and veering into oncoming traffic. The driver was taken into custody. No word yet on what charges he may face. Holiday travel is winding down, but what seems to be on the rise is dissatisfaction with the performance of two of Canada's biggest air carriers, particularly when it comes to arriving on time. CTV's Sarah Plowman has the details.
Punctuality and air travel don't always match, but Canada's two largest airlines are lagging, landing last on a list among 10 of North America's major airlines that measures how often flights are on time.
As a frequent flyer, I do often find that there are a lot of delays.
WestJet was bottom of the list. Last year, 71% of its more than 192,000 flights arrived on time. Air Canada ranked 9th of 10, fewer than 72% of its flights on time last year, of more than 385,000. Both carriers made progress from the year before, but it's still unacceptable, says this expert.
So there's something systemically wrong with the way in which they plan and dispatch aircraft.
A former Air Canada executive notes Canada's weather doesn't help, and neither does a lack of spending on airports.
Unless Canada gets serious about the investments needed into infrastructure to ensure better operating performances by Canada's air carriers, then we will continue to be at the bottom of the list.
Adding to traveler dissatisfaction, new baggage fees. As of this weekend, buying a basic fare ticket on an Air Canada flight in North America or to a sun destination will cost more if you bring a carry-on larger than a purse or a computer bag. $35 for the first bag and $50 for a second.
It's all about the money, isn't it?
I'm tired of people getting on the plane with two carry-ons that are as big as almost a suitcase.
Air Canada has justified it by saying other airlines have done it, like WestJet and Porter.
We are unbundling our services, selling separately the different services so people can buy what they want and not buy what they don't need.
The press secretary for Canada's transport minister called Air Canada's move very disappointing, saying Canadians deserve good service and not extra fees, but wouldn't go as far to say something will be done that would reverse that decision. Heather.
Sarah, thank you. If your travel plans include driving in the Big Apple, be aware of a controversial new regulation that just went into effect. You'll now have to pay up to $9 US to enter designated congestion zones in the center of Manhattan. Larger trucks and tour buses could end up paying up to $22. The toll is meant to fight the city's growing congestion problem and also raise funds to fix the city's struggling public transit system. Coming up, riding into the pages of history.
And he's pulling away.
What this jockey had to overcome to find greatness in Canada and beyond. Plus, from Saskatchewan with love, we take you to the town where matters of the heart are what it's all about. Finding that golden moment in any profession can be quite a feat. For a jockey who's been turning heads in Ontario, the success he's earned is especially sweet. CTV's Adrian Gobriel has his inspiring story.
These stables are home to a cast of gentle giants. And on the track at Woodbine, you'll find a jockey whose smile you can spot a mile down the stretch.
And he's pulling away.
When paired together, they become a sight of sheer speed and agility.
Kazushi Kimura picks up another success.
6 years ago, when he was just 18 years old, Kazushi Kimura left his home and family behind in Hokkaido, Japan, chasing his dream all the way to Toronto's Woodbine racetrack.
New country, new language, new different culture.
And raced away.
Moving quickly is what Kimura does best, first making Toronto his second home, learning English, then conquering the track.
takes, you know, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years to accomplish basically what he's gone through in about 6 or 7.
Camora's first ever win here on Canadian soil came on a horse with a 70-1 chance at winning. And when he steps into the irons of the Kentucky Derby, he'll once again, almost fittingly, be riding a long shot. You're comfortable in that position?
Yeah, I mean, like, no pressure.
He got a late call-up to race in the Derby this season. Camora received a formal invite to the big race.
Right now, I'm feeling like I represent Canada and I represent Japan.
You're rounding the final corner at the Kentucky Derby. You're on the home stretch. Bring us on your horse.
I could hear so much noise from crowd. So I love to be a giant killing, so yeah, let's see what's gonna happen.
And according to those who know Camora best, you'd be wise not to bet against him. Adrian Gabriel, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, climate uncertainty. Canadians endured an impactful year of weather. What's in store for 2025? From coast to coast to coast, Canadians have weathered some wild extremes this year. While some parts of the country have been snowed in or forced to dig out in recent weeks, many regions saw scorching record temperatures earlier in the year. With such a climate of uncertainty, CTV News chief anchor Omar Sachedina recently spoke with science expert Dan Riskin about what we can expect in 2025.
Dan, thanks so much for being here. We spend so much of our lives in this country planning around the weather. Just walk us through the next few months. What will winter look like in Canada this year?
You hear a lot of people talking about how winter's not like it used to be. It's a lot of anecdotes, but the data back that up. What we're experiencing in our winters now isn't what most of us grew up with. It's changed. There was a really nice analysis that was published in The Star that shows that basically the number of cold days that cities across Canada are experiencing is going down. And if you look at Toronto, it has 13 fewer days a year on average now that are below zero. So that's 13 fewer days where kids can go skating or where they can go tobogganing. And so it's not just about changing the temperature and what the average does, it's about changing what it means to grow up a kid in a Canadian city. And that's just where we are this year. And we're on a trajectory going upwards. And so this isn't some new normal where it's going to level off and this is what we need to get used to. It's going to continue to change. And so we're really moving into just a new world.
It's expected to intensify. At the other end of the extreme, of course, is extreme heat, right? And we know that globally, 2024 is likely to be the hottest year on record. And recently, climate scientists in this country said that human-caused climate change made Canada's heat waves more intense and more likely. So are we going to be seeing a repeat of that this year?
Yeah, 2024, hottest year ever. And part of that was the trajectory we're on, but a big part of it also was that it was an El Nino year, and a substantial one at that. And so that changes all the weather patterns and made the heat more intense than it would have been otherwise. This year, 2025, not an El Nino year, so maybe we won't see the same numbers as we saw in 2024, get a little bit of a reprieve, but that overall trajectory maintains. We're still on that upward trajectory. And so those new hotter temperatures, you know, the average temperature in a city in a given month, that's not so hard to deal with, but it's the extremes that really get you.
That heat, of course, was the fuel for the wildfires we saw last year, and we remember those devastating images out of Jasper, right? This jewel in the Rockies burning before our very eyes. We know that this year there are about a dozen communities in the West that will be using artificial intelligence to help in the fight against wildfires. What does that look like exactly?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like having a smoke detector in your house and how the fire department gets there much earlier as a result of that technology. It's basically about putting a whole bunch of fire detectors in the woods, but not just the fire detectors, also a really smart network that knows what a pattern looks like that is cause for concern. So that if a couple of them go off or you start to get a heat sensor that's showing some numbers that are interesting, you know, the artificial intelligence can make a good guess about what's happening and deploy fire departments to deal with that early on. And so AI isn't a magic bullet that's going to solve all these problems, but AI is uniquely well suited to complex kinds of problems like we see with climate change. And I think it's going to be a big part of what we bring as humans to try to fight it.
And I suppose some of that technology could also be used for things like flood mitigation too, right? Because we saw that in many regions across Canada, especially vis-a-vis atmospheric rivers that triggered a lot of water in many areas of the country.
Yeah, and to a large extent, a lot of those technologies are all about predicting where it's going to be, when it's going to be, but you can't really stop it, right? When the clouds are coming, the clouds are coming. And in other places, when hurricanes are coming, the hurricanes are coming. And as you said, these changes make a lot of those things more intense. They make them last longer. And so a big part of it is just figuring out how to live in this new normal, despite the fact that we can see it coming. We still have to get through it.
It's all about adapting. Dan Riskin, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for walking us through this, and Happy New Year to you and your family.
Happy New Year to you.
Still ahead tonight on CTV National News, looking to put love on the map. We leave you tonight with a budding romance in a small Saskatchewan community. In case you missed it, the town called Love embraced the name appeal and worked hard to find new ways to draw people in. CTV's Allison Bamford takes us there.
For years, happy couples have traveled from near and far to tie the knot in love.
A couple came down, their last name was Love, and got married in Love.
Sometimes at the Jamboree grounds, others get hitched outside the post office. And when couples aren't passing through, their postcards and wedding invitations are, just to be stamped with the seal of love.
We will have wedding invitations come in throughout the year. On the heart, it says Love at First Sight, which is actually the title for the history book here in Love.
In a town where all signs point to love, there was one big thing missing.
We aren't Vegas, obviously, but I mean, we do have a chapel of love now here.
A 2-year community endeavor has transformed a donated train station bunkhouse into this.
We wanted to have a venue where they could come no matter what the weather condition was, and a place that would be nice for them to get married in. So we decided to build the chapel.
The chapel opened late last summer and was only able to host one wedding. But the village is hopeful the wedding bells will ring louder this year in its first full season.
We have a couple from Quebec that just booked in for May 25th.
And when they come to visit, the community is likely to live up to its name.
I think if you come, you'll likely come out of curiosity for the name. But if you stay, that's not why you're staying. You're staying for everything else that is here. And it's a fairly welcoming town.
A small town with big hearts everywhere you turn. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Love.
Gotta love that town spirit. That's it for us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. I'm Heather Butts. Omar and Sandy will be back tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Friday. Good night.
Canada's #1 newscast for excellence in journalism.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, winner of the Canadian Screen Award for Best National Newscast. Watch weeknights at 11